but I'll talk to you at midday.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, if you can hear me. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Andrew.
Happy to see you here. You're all welcome. Today, I want us to look at a very interesting topic, which none of us can do without. Why am I saying so? It is because all of us make decisions based on data, whether at a personal level or at the organizational level. Before we begin, let me introduce myself. My name is Andrew Ondari, and I will be taking us through this very critical topic called advanced HR analytics and risk mitigation. Before we go to the meat and flesh of our topic today, I want us to look at the emergence, or that are the themes that we're going to discuss today. That is, one, predictive workforce modeling, where we are going to look at some of the models that are used by HR managers to predict workforce needs and what can be done in order to forestall potential risks. Secondly, we shall be looking at HR risk assessment on the understanding that all of us face risks as HR managers related to all the functions that we perform. Be it recruitment, there is a risk of employee exit immediately after onboarding. If it's training, there is a possibility of people not performing their work even after the training. If it is compensation, there is a risk of paying people and yet they leave the organization. So there are many risks that are associated with HR, and I will categorize them accordingly, starting with operational risks, secondly, legal or compliance risks, and three, we have strategic risks, and how we can go about assessing these risks and then taking measures so that these risks do not affect us negatively. Thirdly, we will be looking at people, particularly return on investment from the various initiatives that we take related to recruitment. What returns do we get from recruitment? Training, if we are investors in people, what returns do we expect from there? Or if it is bonuses and other benefits, how do we benefit from this? What are the returns that we get from these benefits and bonuses? And then lastly, we shall look at three cases related to this analytics so that we have a better understanding of what HR analytics entails, how it is applied in various situations, and how do we interpret these case scenarios so that we make decisions based on data. So ladies and gentlemen, those are the four key areas we are going to look at this morning, and I will invite us to participate by way of asking questions or making comments. Secondly, I will also invite you to share your experiences. That is very important because all of us may be facing various challenges or have done things differently with respect to the various evaluations that we have done. And it could be important that we share our experiences so that we learn from each other. Excuse me. So, ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome. By way of introduction, let me talk about the concept of predictive workforce modeling, which by definition, I've said that is the use of data and analytics for purposes of predicting future HR needs and how those needs can be met. Talking of data and analytics, data are a set of facts or figures that are collected either through questionnaires, interviews, and other methods of data collection. And this can be quantitative or qualitative. For purposes of this presentation, we will be looking at quantitative data, which most of us rely on to make decisions. There are many quantitatives related to the functions of HR. For example, recruitment. There are quite a number of quantitatives that we will be looking at. For example, time to fill, that is data. 2, cost per hire, that is data. 3, quality of hire, that is data. So this data is analyzed and interpreted to make decisions. So analytics refers to interpretation of the data that we have collected. And from those interpretations, we are able to make a decision or forecast future changes or requirements in terms of human resources. In terms of purpose, predictive workforce modeling enable us to anticipate changes in demand and supply of labor. Demand is what is likely to be required in the future, where you are looking at, 1, the current number and the quality of people that we have. 2, depending on your growth projections, how many people you are going to require in the future. So the number of people required in the future. And then you take into consideration, for example, technology. If technology is going to be adopted, what are the benefits you are going to get from this? So in terms of demand, you look at the number of people you have currently. Secondly, you look at the future number of people you are going to require. And then you look at the gains from that technology, and then you make a calculation. But that's something that we can do in the next few minutes. So the purpose of predictive workforce modeling is to anticipate or address various changes or requirements in terms of the number and the quality of employees. And why do we need this? So that we avoid surpluses or deficits of labor, which can be catastrophic to an organization. The scope, what are we covering here in terms of predictive workforce modeling, is 1, cross-department. It applies to all departments, sorry. That we are not doing this predictive analytics for HR department only, no. This cuts across all the departments because these departments are occupied by employees. People move in and out of these departments, affecting demand and supply of labor. And that becomes our concern because we want to have the optimum number of employees in all departments. In terms of regions, especially for organizations that are large, meaning that they are spread over different geographical locations, So again, if an organization like a government department can be located in Mombasa, another one in Garissa, another one in Eldoret, and elsewhere. Those are regions, especially government has regional offices because it serves people all over the country. And in a devolved government like ours, we are talking of regions in terms of devolved units. So we are talking about counties. And then it also covers job families, where job families are functions that are closely related. For example, operational staff could have jobs like personal assistants, secretaries, or office assistants. Those are job families which are related to that operational level. Then there's the supervisory level, then managerial level, and then the board level. But for us, we are looking at the managerial, supervisory, and operational levels. So when we talk of predictive workforce, we are covering all these areas for purposes of ensuring that we make decisions not only for our own departments, but for all other departments and regions. Foundation of predictive workforce modeling is that one, it relies on historical data. And I dare say that in terms of data analytics, there are about 5 types of data analytics. Let me mention 4. One is descriptive analytics, where we are looking at past activities, processes, functions, and extract data from them. And this will be used in predictive analytics. So there is descriptive. And then secondly, there is prescriptive. And this is where we are, that using historical data or descriptive data, we are able to predict future outcomes of our initiatives. For example, training. If we train people today and we do some analysis in terms of returns, we are able to project into the future in terms of those returns. And for us to predict those trends, we need to look at historical data, which can cover, for example, 3 to 5 years. So you look at historical data 3 to 5 years back in history. This will help us to determine the direction in which we are moving, and that is trend. And then in predictive algorithms, we are going to look at how certain outcomes can repeat themselves into the future. For example, we are looking at productivity levels of employees in the last 5 years, and we can identify a trend, and this trend can be increasing. Based on that increment, we can predict using those algorithms going forward that we are likely to experience an increased productivity of our employees or our organization in general. Then second last, who are the users of predictive workforce modeling? HR leaders, this is where we come in, and we are at the center of all these predictive analytics. We provide leadership and we provide direction when it comes to human resource management, from recruitment to exit. when employees exit, what does that imply to us? Probably there are several things that are not working and therefore need addressing. And that is why we do a calculation like turnover rate as part of this analytics. So if you do a trend analysis of turnover, you are likely to project the number of people who are likely to leave in the next 3 or 4 years. Managers in all departments will also use this, because from this predictive analysis, they are going to determine the numbers of employees who are likely to work in their departments, the movement of employees, either upward, horizontally, or outside. By outside, I mean exits, because they also need to get to have the optimum numbers of employees who will be working under them. Then workforce planners, these are HR officers who will be utilizing this data for purposes of obtaining insights that will feed into our strategic planning. And then what are the enablers of predictive workforce modeling? These are tools that can help us to, one, collect data, two, analyze data, three, interpret that data, and four, give us options on what can be done to improve the current situation or take care of a change in the situation in the future. One of the tools is HRMS, some add somewhere, HRIMS, Human Resource Information Management Systems. And this is what most of us use to capture data related to all the HR functions. And then the new kid in the city is the AI tools. We have various types of AIs, for example, ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Gemini, among others, which can help us to analyze data, collect data, and interpret this data. And I'm sure most of us have integrated AI tools into our functions. For example, recruitment. If you introduce AI into it, for example, in ATS, application tracking systems, it should be able to give you the right number and the quality of people you require for interview. And even in performance management, we use AI tools where data can be analyzed within a very short time and get the results, so that we take care of all the changes in our environment. And again, let me mention, even if I will mention it again, most dashboards use AI tools to enable them collect, analyze, and interpret data in real time. And then we have other analytics platforms like Excel, Access, Sage, those of us who are doing accounting. So ladies and gentlemen, this is what we are going to discuss in general as we move forward. What are the drivers of HR analytics? Because we are talking about emergence of HR analytics as the main predictor of success in HR management. Predictor of success, that you cannot possibly succeed if you do not embrace and adopt HR analytics. It can be very difficult for you. And again, those of us who have now realized that HR managers are part of the strategic team will already know that we cannot play our strategic role without having skills related to HR analytics, because with these analytics, we are able to argue our case before the strategic managers and persuade them to invest in certain areas of HR or support certain HR initiatives. And this can only be done through data. For example, if you want to increase the budget for training, you must provide evidence that indeed training is adding value and therefore there is need for investment. So without this data, we are likely to have very serious problems when we are making presentation to senior management or even the board for support for certain initiatives. Allow me to go through these drivers point by point for purposes of understanding where we are coming from in terms of data analytics. One is the emergence of big data. That around us, there are thousands and thousands of information or data that are flying around. And this big data is generated both from within and outside our organizations. In terms of big data, there are 5 key characteristics. Allow me to mention 3. One, volume. That the volume of data generated around the workforce is huge, mind-boggling. And this huge data can only benefit an organization if we have systems that can pick relevant information or data that we can use for purposes of performing our functions or improving our businesses. Second is velocity, is the speed at which information flows around us. And today, courtesy of technology, information can be transmitted within a very short time around the globe. For example, Twitter as social media. People tweet. Within seconds, information has been transmitted to everywhere in the world through a tweet, depending on the interest that that tweet generates. So velocity is the speed, and therefore as HR managers, we cannot afford to lag behind because we need to move with this speed. If we lag behind, then we will be overtaken by our competitors, and very soon we lose our competitive position. So velocity is very important, and that is why we need to address the issue of analytics when it comes to HR functions, because the speed at which information is moving is very high. For example, a negative statement made by either our employee or somebody outside there can move very fast and can damage the reputation of our organization. And therefore, we need to move with the speed because information around us is moving very fast. And then the last V is variety. A lot of information, variety. Different types of information related either to performance, training, compensation, recruitment, employee relations, and other HR functions. This variety must be addressed so that if we are, for example, an equal opportunity employer and there is new information related to, for example, people with disabilities, For example, autism, is it a disability or a condition? So if we have such people around us, do we need to develop policies to take care of these employees? Because other organizations may have generated such kind of policies, and if we lag behind, we are likely to appear to be discriminative by not adopting this new information. So variety is key, and we need to look at big data in terms of volume, velocity, and variety. There are other two, for example, value is another V, that of what use is this information to us? Yes, we might have a lot of information in terms of volume, very fast, that is velocity, variety, different, but of what value is it to us? That any information we have in our custody or we have stored in our system must be useful, value. And when we talk of value, we are talking about one, revenue generation. Can we use this data to generate revenue? Two, cost. Can this information help us to cut cost? And three, customer satisfaction, both internal and external. Can this information or can this data help us to satisfy both our internal and external customers? So ladies and gentlemen, big data has made data analytics to be very important, and therefore a lot of our focus is on how we can manage this big data and help us to predict, because we are talking about predictive analytics, predict the future outcomes of our initiatives. And then the other driver is technology. That technology has changed over time. And today we are talking about artificial intelligence because this is a game changer for most of the organizations. And then machine learning, how we can train our machines to help us improve our services. That machines can help us to interpret data, process data, depending on how we train these machines. Even artificial intelligence is part of this training. Then global competition. We operate in a global environment. Why do we say so? Because in a global environment, we are all interconnected. Interconnected through improvements in technology, in communication, as well as transport. That whatever happens in Europe in the area of HR can be transported to Kenya or imported to Kenya, and the people use that information in Kenya because of improvements in technology, because we can transfer data from any corner of the world. So we are interconnected. And this interconnection means that we have competition globally. Competition in terms of one, human resources. We are competing for this talent because certain skills are scarce, not only in Kenya, but elsewhere. And therefore, we cannot afford to lose our talents to competitors in our markets. Why? Because we lose out on productivity, on survival. Very soon, we are going to look at risks. That turnover is a risk to the organization. One, because we lose the skills that are used for productivity. Two, replacement costs are very high. And three, reputation is affected. So when we talk of competition, we are talking about competing for human resources. Two, we are competing for customers. And three, we are competing for products. So for us to survive in this global competition, we need to conduct data analytics related to recruitment, what are our numbers like when we recruit people in terms of time to fill, cost of filling, and the quality of new recruits. If we don't analyze this, then we cannot compare ourselves with the competitors, both locally and internationally. So globally, we need to be competitive in terms of our human resources and position ourselves in a way that, one, our employees are rare to find, two, our employees are unique, and three, our employees are inimitable. That means that they cannot be imitated. That positioning is a strategic way of doing it. And I'm sure somebody can ask, how do we position ourselves so that our employees are rare, unique, and inimitable? The other driver is talent shortages. That depending on the industry in which you operate, certain skills may be rare and therefore hard to find. For example, engineers. Not all engineers are in short supply, but there are certain engineering skills that we may need. For example, geological engineers in Kenya are in short supply. So organizations like KenGen might have a very difficult time retaining such people because they are also needed elsewhere. And the geothermal companies can also require engineers. And again, in the motor industry, you have seen the models of vehicles that are produced every year. In terms of shape, in terms of performance, in terms of cost, there's a lot of engineering that went into it. So talent shortages can affect our performance as HR managers. And therefore, we need to look at talent shortages in terms of demand and supply so that we ensure that we have the requisite talents that can perform the functions that we want them to so that we achieve our strategic objectives. In the medical sector, people like oncologists, you can count the numbers. They are very few. So if you are in a hospital environment, getting an oncologist is not easy. Some of your patients may have to wait for a long period of time before they get attended. And for this reason, we need to do a HR analytics to find out what are these critical skills that we need and therefore should be retained. And that's why we need to do a retention analysis so that we don't lose this critical talent. Another driver is HR compliance pressure. That one of the risks we will be mentioning in the next few minutes is compliance. Compliance has to do with the laws, rules, and regulations that require HR managers to align themselves with. We are all aware that most of our functions are regulated either by law or industry regulations. For example, recruitment is regulated in terms of this equal opportunity employment and disability. That we need, for example, those of us working in our public sector, we need to have the face of Kenya. And probably some of us watched the recently concluded hiring of Supreme Court judges, and most of them were asked which tribe they come from. That was a critical question, not only for purposes of avoiding discrimination, but ensuring that there is regional and tribal balance of new hires in our organizations in the public sector. So compliance is very key because it is a requirement that all positions filled in public sector should have the face of Kenya. It's a legal requirement. And then lastly is operational risks, which I will mention later under risk management. That this has to do with the day-to-day functioning of the HR department. And one of the operational risks could be technological downtime, that our technologies might fail us, either because of a technical problem or a power problem. Sometimes power goes off unexpectedly, and we do not have contingency measures to ensure that our services are up and running. Another operational risk is the voluntary turnover. Somebody resigns today without notice. That throws the HR managers into a spin if you do not have suitable replacements, and that becomes a risk. And again, we shall talk about these risks in a few. We have talked about data and analytics. We need to understand HR data so that as we analyze this and predict future outcomes of our initiatives, we need to know which type of data we will be handling. There are quite a number of data that we handle on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, including demographic data, such as age, gender, experience, education, diversity statistics, and others. That in terms of gender, we need to have a gender balance as one of the regulatory requirements. In terms of age, we need to have a balance. I'm trying to imagine an organization which have only Gen Zs. I'm trying to imagine. In the unlikely event that you only have Gen Zs, you can imagine the situation. Or even in terms of age, how do we balance between Gen Zs, millennials, and Gen Xers? Because of their age differences, their perspectives and ways of working are different. So we need to find a balance by way of getting this data and doing a trend analysis so that in the future, we know what to expect. When you talk of experience, this is the number of years somebody has worked in the same position or similar. And again, they say that there is nothing that can replace experience. For example, when we are hiring, we are looking at experience. Why particularly experience? It is because most of the jobs that we are hiring require people who can do the work, not people who will come and try, who can do. Because experience has taught us how we can do things that can work and how we can do things that cannot work. Again, education, we look at the skills and knowledge that people have based on education. Though in some positions we don't really require very highly educated people, but it's good to have educated people. Why? Because they are able to understand things very easily. Two, they are able to interpret relationships in their environment. And three, they are able to make a contribution which is valuable unlike uneducated people who may be struggling. So education becomes an important predictor, even in terms of retention, that you are not likely to retain lowly educated people if the trend shows that the industry is hiring masters and doctorate employees. And then the element of diversity includes all this, that we need to have a diverse workforce. Why? Because of one, compliance, two, variety of insights that we get from different people from different backgrounds, and three, performance. I don't know, for those of us who have done organizational behavior, you may realize that when men are in the company of women in our workplaces, they tend to behave better. And again, that's the psychology of men. Performance data, this is collected through performance appraisals, which we can do either quarterly, biannually, or annually. In some organizations, performance measurements are done on a daily basis. And what are the tools that you can use is dashboards. So you can have dashboards where people post their performance on a daily basis. And as managers, we can determine the trend daily, weekly, monthly, so that we don't have to wait for a long time for us to take corrective measures. And then these appraisal ratings vary depending on your policy and the organization you are working with. So policy ratings could maybe, especially in the public sector, they say exceeds expectation, meets expectation, below expectation. And there are figures associated with these ratings. If you meet expectations, it means you are scoring above 95%. And then meeting expectation between 70 and 95. Below expectation could be 70 and below. So depending again on your policy, the ratings may vary. And those ratings are used to make a decision. For those who meet expectation, you can make a decision to reward them so that they are motivated. For those who meet expectations, you can develop systems so that they can improve their performance. For those below expectations, you can put them in a PIP program so that they can also improve their performance. And then attendance data, and again with the GNZs around us, it can be a dicey issue, because most of these GNZs say, why should I come at 8 if I can come at 2 and do the work that I'm assigned to completion and satisfaction? Nevertheless, we need to have attendance data that tracks absenteeism. Absenteeism affects performance. So if many employees are absent on any particular or in any particular week or month, it affects performance. And employees can be absent for valid reasons, but those who are absent for inexcusable reasons, that affects performance. And measures should be, don't want to collect data that we are not using rather. Lateness again affects our performance. For example, in organizations where there are peak hours, if somebody is late during those peak hours, it will affect your performance. For example, in a hotel, there are peak periods. Probably in the morning, people coming for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. In between, there is less staff, so you can do with fewer employees. So you can allow lateness in between. But during critical moments like lunch hour, you cannot allow people to be late during that time. It's a critical moment, and you can easily lose your customers if those operatives are not at work on time. And then lastly is workforce availability. Availability can be looked at in different ways. One, available for promotion. And there are two categories of people who are available for promotion. One, there are those who are available now, meaning that they have all the potential to be promoted. Two, there are those who will be available later. That means they will be ready later. And therefore, development programs can be put in place. And then there are those who will be available soon. These are people who have some potential, but certain nerves have to be adjusted for them to be ready. And then recruitment data. I've mentioned some of this data like cost of hiring. How much did it take you to hire a person? And there's a formula that you can use. For example, the total cost over the total number of people hired. You multiply that by 100, you get your total hiring cost per hire. And then recruitment timelines. How much time did it take you to conduct the recruitment process from beginning to end? So you are looking at time, and at the end time, you look at the number of days, you will get the number of days that you are looking for. And then applicant conversion. This is the rate at which the applicants are converted into employees. Sometimes we make advertisements, but these advertisements do not attract people. Or if they attract very few people. And therefore, it means that you do not have variety from whom you can pick. And then those that you pick may not accept the offer. So you look at all those rates. For example, acceptance offer is a conversion rate, which can be calculated statistically. So you look at the number of acceptance over the total number of offers, you multiply that by 100, you will get your total acceptance rate. And then there's training data. This relates to all the data about training. For example, the time taken to complete a training, to the completion rates. By completion rate, we mean the number of people who have successfully completed a course. This course could be mandatory. For example, senior management course for those of us in public sector, it's a mandatory course for some people. If you refuse, it means that you do not progress. So how many people have finished the mandatory supervisory and management course? So you look at the total number of people who have successfully completed, you divide that by the total number of employees who enrolled for that course, you multiply by 100, you will get a completion rate. An industry standard for this completion rate is around 85%. Why not 100%? Because people can be sick. They may not complete the course. Two, people can be transferred. That interrupts the course. Four, God forbid, people can die in the course of this training. So completion rate is acceptable, 15%. And then lastly is engagement data, which again, we shall talk about. That this is the level of satisfaction or commitment that people have to their organizations. Call it emotional investment in the organization. So you look at the total number of scores, divided by the total number of expected scores, you multiply that by 100, you will get your engagement score. And again, I will use this as an example in our case as we conclude this training around 11. Types of predictive workforce modeling. I know many of us would want to look at regression analysis, time series, and others. But it is something that we can do later. But for now, we are looking at several predictive analytical models, which can help us to predict the future needs of our employees and how these needs can be met. Some of these predictive analytics are derived from a human resource plan. For example, demand forecasting, that this is the number and the quality of people likely to be required in the future. You forecast. So how do you forecast? One, you look at the current number of employees. Two, you look at your projected number of employees required. And again, you go back to your strategic plan. For example, you want to expand if you are a health organization. You want to open a branch in Kisumu. And in Kisumu, you look at the number of people you require and the skill set that they must have. So you look at the number, if that's your strategic plan to expand. So you look at the current vis-a-vis the future. So in the future, you might need like 20 employees to work in that branch. Currently, you have 8. So you have a deficit. And that deficit can be addressed through recruitment and selection. Secondly, you are looking at supply forecasting, where you are looking at the potential number of employees you are likely to have. Demand is what you are likely to require. Supply is what you are likely to have. So what you need to do, you take stock of the current number of employees and the potential number of employees that you are likely to require in the future. So if the supply is higher, it means you are likely to recruit. If the supply you are likely to have is lower, it means you are likely to offload staff, either through retrenchment or laying off. And that is why we need supply forecasting by looking at, one, the current number of employees, two, the future requirements, and then if you do the math, the future minus talent, you will get the deficit, which can be a gap. And that brings us to gap analysis as one of the ways of predicting our staffing needs. So there are 2 gaps. By taking into consideration demand and supply. Where demand is more than supply, you have a shortage. And where supply is more than demand, you have a surplus. And there are several things that you can do, shortages and surpluses. For some organizations, shortages can be addressed through new recruitments. And if not, so that you can contain costs, you enlarge jobs so that the current employees can absorb the extra roles that were performed by employees exiting, for example. For surpluses, and again, there are several strategies that you can engage in. One, you can do secondment to a sister organization so that you can remove a surplus from one area. Or 2, you can lay off. Or 3, you can retrench. The other type of predictive analytics is scenario planning. A scenario is a possible future condition or circumstance. Possible future condition. And these conditions can affect our operations as HR managers. For example, there are several scenarios we are looking at here, possible future situations or conditions. One scenario is adoption of AI. Secondly is home working. Three is individualized training. So if those are scenarios, then you ask yourself, what can we do in order for us to take care of those situations in the future? In the case of AI, that we are looking at changes in our technology and organizations are adopting new technologies like AI, it means that you are going to train your employees. So that scenario of AI adoption requires that you start training your employees now. If it is home working, you start developing systems so that you can enable people to work away from their workstations. And if it is another scenario like economic downturn, like today, many people are complaining that the cost of living and production is very high. So in such a scenario where the economy is not performing, several options are available to us. One is a wait and see, which is not advisable. Two, you adapt to those changes. And three, you reduce your workforce because you are not likely to have the resources to pay them. So those are several scenarios, and we are talking about scenarios as possible future situations. And then lastly, is the second last is skill projection, which means that we are focusing into the future to identify the possible skills our employees are likely to require, skills projection. And in the case of technology, which I've mentioned that we are going to adopt AI, there is a projection of AI skills that our employees need to have. And then turnover modeling, we are anticipating future exits. And again, we need to take stock of the past, because we said that predictive analytics is characterized by historical data. You look at the number of employees who have left in the last 5 years to date. And then when you look at the numbers, it will tell you how many are likely to leave in the next 1 or 2 years. For example, in the last 3 years, 20 people have left. So how do you project using this turnover? You divide 20 by 3. Why? Because it's an average of the number of people who have left in the last 3 years. So divide 20 by 3, you'll get like 6.5 or thereby, and that will be a projection of the possible turnover of your employees in the next 1 year. And if that is the case, you start looking for areas where turnover is high. Which department? By way of this categorization, you are able to anticipate relatively accurately the number of people you are likely to hire if there are turnovers, or the number of positions that are likely to be filled in the next 1 year. Before we take a break, let us look at application of this predictive analytics. Where do we use this? We use this in strategic planning. For example, in HR, there are various strategies we engage in. One is resource allocation, particularly human resource allocation, that we allocate human resources to positions that are critical to the organization, critical positions. And the critical positions are those that bring value to our organizations. And this value is in terms of revenue, profit, sustainability. So which of these positions are likely to require the skilled labor? Hiring is also a strategic area, which is tied to bullet 2, that we need to, in case of supply and demand, where demand is likely to be higher than supply, we hire people. So that is a forecast of future recruitment. And then development decisions. This has to do with enhancing employee skills and knowledge in terms of training, which is also tied to bullet 4. Secondly, we apply predictive analytics in talent acquisition, where we are looking at possible future requirements, that is in terms of demand against supply. So if you have a deficit, you are forecasting a staffing gap, which means that you start making plans for recruitment, because talent acquisition is hiring. Succession planning, again, I'm sure we have plans to ensure that there are suitable replacements for those employees who leave or are transferred or are promoted. And this is by looking at potential employees. Who are these employees likely to occupy those senior positions? So you look at the skills and the leadership potential of the current employees. And those potentials include: 1, experience; 2, leadership competencies; 3, communication skills; 4, interpersonal skills; and 5, performance. These are the people with the potential. So you do a skills analysis so that you identify those people who are eligible for promotion. And this also helps us to prepare career plans for our employees. Succession planning is important to all of us because it helps us to deal with the risks of employee turnover. That if employees leave our organizations, we must have adequate numbers of employees to take over those who have left. So without succession plans, it means that we may not have adequate numbers, and that pipeline from the lowest to the highest level dries up. And when it dries up, it means that we have gaps or a vacuum, and the nature does not allow for vacuums. Learning and development is another area we apply data analytics, where we are designing programs to take care of those predicted skills. I mentioned earlier that when we are doing this predictive analysis, we are looking at demand and supply. And if we look at bullet 2, supply, you assess the current talent availability, skills, and capacity. Skills and capacity. So going to this development, we are looking at predicted skills. It could be skills in technology. It could be skills in finance. It could be skills in human resources. For example, today, with AI, we are not going to do business as usual. Because if it's recruitment, AI can do that. Training, AI can do that. Performance management, AI can do that. So what is our position as HR managers? Three things. One, critical thinking. That's a skill that we need to inculcate in our employees. Two, decision making. AI cannot make a decision for you. It can give you options, but cannot decide for you. And then lastly is, so we have said critical thinking, decision making, and analytical skills. So without this, we are not going to function effectively going forward. And then the resource optimization, where we are allocating enough resources to our employees so that they can produce the desired results. And in the resources, we are looking at three resources. One, human resources. Two, physical resources. And three, financial resources. But because we are talking about predictive workforce, our focus is on employees as a resource. And we need to optimize this resource by ensuring that we have the right number and the quality of employees doing the right things in the right way, at the right time, and at the right places. So we allocate those employees where demand is highest. For example, in a bank, demand could be at the front office, the tellers, those of us who are visiting banks. But again, today, because of technology, those tellers are likely to be phased out because customers have the skills to do self-service. If it's depositing money, they can deposit on their own. If it's withdrawing, they can withdraw using technology. So those tellers are likely to be rendered redundant in the future in the face of technology. So the demand for tellers is likely to reduce. So if you are looking at possible future skills you are likely to require, probably bank tellers are not one of the skills that you are going to require. Then lastly is cost management. By optimizing resources, we ensure that we manage our costs. If we use a lot of resources, for example, in recruitment, in training, in performance, in dispute resolution, that will mean that the organization is not able to grow its finances, is not able to bring value to its shareholders, and that it cannot compete. As HR managers, we need to show this, that we are able to contain costs by not spending so much on recruitment, training, and others. So how do we go about this? We conduct analytics in all the areas of HR. In training, we conduct analytics. How much are we spending? The cost of training. And if you do a trend analysis of the cost in the last 5 years, you should be able to tell how much you are going to spend in the next 2-3 years. So cost management is important. What is the importance of predictive analytics? Very quickly, so that we can make comments or share experiences, is workforce readiness. That as a department, as an organization, we ensure that we have qualified employees and we have the right numbers to do the work and help the organization achieve its strategic objectives. So we are ready. Ready in terms of numbers, ready in terms of quality. 2 is risk mitigation. As I mentioned earlier, that almost every function of HR has risks. Recruitment, training, performance, there are risks associated with them. But if we do the analytics, we ensure that we hire the right people, because we should have done the quality of hire. 2, we train people for relevant skills. And again, we should have done return on investment from training. So in that way, we avoid risks associated with those functions. The other importance of predictive analytics is cost efficiency, where we are reducing the cost of doing business, particularly in the HR function. If we optimize the HR headcount, and by headcount we mean the number of people who are currently in the workforce or on the payroll, which means that these are the critical skills that are required. And why do we need to have the right number? So that we don't spend on positions that are not required. They are redundant. And the other area of cost is training. How much do we spend in training? We need to optimize this so that we don't spend so much on training at the expense of the overall business performance. And again, we should not shy away from investing in training if the training can bring value. And again, when we are talking about return on investment from training, I will demonstrate how this investment can bring value to the organization. You need to look at the revenue generated before training against the revenue generated after training. And then you divide that by the revenue after training, you multiply that by 100, you'll get the rate. So if the rate is above a certain projected figure, then you are doing well. But if it is below, for example, if the projection could be 15% of revenue growth after training. So you compare the percentage that you have got so that if the training exceeds the projected, it means that you are doing well. If it's below the expected, then you are not doing well. Certain adjustments must be done. Employee growth, and this has to do with 2 things. 1, skills acquisition, and 2, career development, that people need to enhance their careers. If it is finance, they grow within that department. HR, the same. IT, the same. So they need to grow within a department. And this can only be done through training and development programs. Organizational value, another value is decision support. And again, I indicated that without data, we cannot make informed decisions. Informed decisions related to hiring, 2, training, 3, rewarding. So we cannot reward people, for example, if we don't have data. Which type of data do we need? Performance data. So who are these employees who are doing very well, who deserve rewards? So that we develop a reward culture where performers are motivated. So this data can help us to make decisions in all areas of HR. And then the last one is to enable us to quickly respond to changes in our environment. And that calls for agility. So through data analytics, we become agile. Agile because we are able to predict possible changes in the future, and adapt in advance. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the first part of our conversation this morning. I will now invite your questions or comments so that we can go to the second part. The floor is ours. Anybody with a comment, a question, or an experience to share, please go ahead.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm called Consolate.
Consolate, go ahead.
Some of the things I'll ask are just clarifications because from my end, I think I have unstable network. It keeps showing, and sometimes I miss out what you said.
Sorry
Since
for
I
that.
thought it was only me, so I didn't want to interrupt the class. So when you were discussing the concept of predictive work modeling, you were talking of the scope, and you are explaining to us what you mean by job families. So I'll request for a clarification on job families.
Okay.
And then when you are discussing types of HR data,
yeah,
you are looking at training data. Yeah, formulas you keep giving us. I hope you'll give us those formulas. I ran away from a science class because I didn't want to do maths and went to do HR. Now I'm finding the maths has followed me there. So I wanted to inquire when we are measuring totals of what is completed. You know, you clearly said it may not be possible to get 100% of the total trained, 100%, because you're looking at total required to complain, to be trained, and then total who have actually completed the course for you to be able to measure. And you said you may not get 100% for whatever reasons. Maybe somebody sick, somebody died, as you said, God forbid. So I wanted to know, there must be, is there a yield loss rate acceptable? Like if I lost by 2% or 3%, I should still consider that training was successfully completed. Do we have yield loss rates that are acceptable? That's what I wanted to know. And then when you were discussing types of predictive workforce modeling, scenario planning, I wanted you, I also lost you a bit there. If you could just explain something on a little more on scenario planning.
Okay.
And lastly, I think that is it. That is it.
Okay. Thank you, Consolate, for your questions. And yes, it is important for us to move together so that nobody is left behind. Allow me to remove this red mark here by way of stopping sharing, and then I can share again because it will keep recurring.
It's okay. That's fine.
Okay. So Consolate is asking, under predictive, the concept of predictive workforce analytics or workforce modeling, and I mentioned job families under the scope. If you can look at bullet 3, there is the scope of predictive workforce modeling. And she's particularly interested in understanding job families. As I indicated, job families are roles that are similar in their nature, which our employees perform at different levels. Similar roles that people perform. And I mentioned an example of a PA and a secretary or office assistant. These are similar roles which can be put together as a family. They belong to the same category. In finance, as an example, you may have a finance officer. You may also have another role like accountant or an analyst. This is another family of jobs which could be related. So job families are roles that are closely related in terms of specific roles, which can be determined by role specifications. They are slightly different, but they perform similar jobs. So that is the classification I gave. Secondly, Consulate wanted to understand HR data. We are looking at source types of HR data. And one of the HR data that she is interested in is training data. If you look at bullet 5, training data. And her concern was in terms of completion rate, what could be the acceptable rate for completion? Because we expect that people who have enrolled in a training program should complete this training 100%. But again, due to unavoidable circumstances, some employees may not complete this training successfully. They can do it partly, but they did not complete it successfully. So our concern was, is there a rate which is acceptable, beyond which we cannot accept, we cannot yield? And I mentioned that the industry standard is that 85% completion rate, 85 and above is acceptable. This is an industry standard. But for you as an organization, you need to develop a policy on the minimum acceptable completion rate, especially for those mandatory training courses. So through this policy, you are able to determine your own standard. But the industry standard is 85%. Your own standard, depending on the circumstances, could be 75% or 70%. So you should be guided by your policy on the minimum acceptable completion rate. Otherwise, if so many people cannot complete and there is no valid explanation as to why they did not complete, that means some action need to be taken, either to freeze promotion for them or to show cause, while disciplinary action cannot be taken against them. And then lastly, types of modeling. I mentioned 6, and the concern is scenario modeling. Consolate, I said scenario modeling is where you are looking at the possible future situations, possible future situations in our environment, both internal and external. And you can use an example of pastel. Consolate, I hope you are listening to me.
Yes,
Pastel
I'm
as an
listening.
example.
Yeah, I know pastel. Yeah.
Let us take an example of economic environment. That given the past 3 or 4 years in Kenya, the economy has been declining. That means that as an organization, you have not been able to generate enough revenue and profits to pay your employees. So if that is the case, you project a possible decline in the next 1 year. And again, taking the political environment into consideration, the economic environment is likely to decline further because this is a political economy. If there is a possible further decline in the next 1 year before elections, you are anticipating certain numbers of employees. That with this decline in revenue, decline in profits, you are likely to require fewer people. So that is the scenario, fewer people. So if you are going to require fewer people, then you do your analytics. Your current employees are 20. In the future, you are likely to require 10 because that is fewer. So your projection into the future is that you are going to require 10 people. So what
I've lost you, Andrew. I don't know if it is only me. Felix, Victor, do you people hear Andrew?
Oh, we can't hear him.
Oh, so we've all lost
We've
him.
lost him. Yeah.
A network problem. We've just lost the trainer. We are waiting.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I lost my network from my end. So consulate, scenario planning, that is where we were. And I was looking at the possible. Hello, you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, thank you. So I was looking at the economic environment, and we are looking at the possible scenario here in the case of a recession or economic decline. That means you are going to require less employees. So doing this analytics will tell you that because of the current economic times, you can only afford to pay 10 employees. So what happens to the other 10? You are likely to, like I said earlier, to second them to another organization or lay them off or retrench. So that is scenario planning. Anybody else with a question?
Just something
Consulate,
related.
go ahead.
Because when you were discussing it, I think you mentioned something to do with home working. And I wanted to know.
Home working, yes.
Yes, I wanted to know, maybe in your experience, what have been the risks the HR face with this home working? Can we know the kind of risks we are already facing or likely to face when we embrace home working? Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, Consulate. We have a section for risk management. In the next few minutes, I'll be talking about risks. But nevertheless, allow me to answer your question. Yes, home working has its own risks. One, there is the possibility of stress and burnout, that the employees are likely to be stressed because of the work they are doing. They are not moving outside. They are in their home or their houses from morning to evening and nobody to talk to. So stress is a reality in this new environment of home working. Secondly, performance monitoring can be a bit tricky because the employees, because they are working virtually, sometimes they may not achieve the standards. Why? Because they are not guided physically by their own supervisors, and therefore they are likely to miss on targets arising from either lack of physical supervision or stress. Another aspect is that social aspect. Human beings are by nature social animals and need to interact with others to share new insights physically. They also need to express their emotions, especially when they are stuck or they are not achieving their objectives. So again, in terms of social networking, this is lost in this environment of home working. So what then can managers do? One, they can do a mixed method where 2 days home working, 3 days on site. That means that they have interactions with other people in the organization, and that is what you call the hybrid method, hybrid. Number two, you can schedule social meetings wherever you may wish so that employees can come together, social meetings, can come together, take a cup of coffee, laugh about this and that helps to reduce stress. And then number three, you can introduce virtual games where people are seeing each other physically and also relating and sharing those insights. So these are three interventions that you can undertake in order to address the risks associated with home working. And again, let me also add another risk is that sometimes, like we have witnessed this morning, network. You may not have a stable network for employees to perform, and yet there are clients waiting. Some organizations provide the network, but again, you cannot be 100% sure that this technology can work throughout the day, either because of lack of power. For example, power goes where you are, goes off. If it goes off, it means that even your computer goes off, you can't work unless you have contingency measures. In an organization, you may have a generator which can reduce the downtime. But if you are working from home and maybe your landlord has not installed a generator, it means that you stop working. So that's another risk for home working. Consolata?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, let us now move to the next part. If there is no other question. Okay, let us now look at risks, HR risk assessment. We are all aware that risks can be very detrimental to an organization if it is allowed to
slideshow. Please go to slideshow. I have eye problems so that I'm able to read what you're saying.
Sorry. Types of, let me move. Okay, I was saying that risks can have detrimental effects on an organization if they are not addressed adequately. So what are these risks we are talking about? These are situations or events that have a potential of causing failure of a system, a process, or failure of an organization to achieve its objectives. So as HR managers, we are called upon to identify, analyze, mitigate, and monitor risks that may arise from any corner of our HR function. So what are risks, or what is it that we call risk assessment? This is basically identifying and evaluating risks associated with employees in an organization. Identifying. And identifying means that you locate the kind of risk that
We've lost you.
Hello? So I said that identification is about establishing the type of risks that you are likely to face. And then evaluation is assessment of the likely cause, impact, and likelihood. Purpose.
We don't see the slides.
Okay. You can see them now?
Yes.
Thank you.
Marim, excuse me.
Yes, sir.
For some 3 minutes, you are offline.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If you are talking on your end, it's possible that you lost us.
Somebody may not have heard. Eh?
No, you are not there.
Some of us were not hearing you.
Okay. Fine. Thank you. Let me go back there. I was saying that risks are all around us, and we need to be aware of these risks because of their attendant consequences. That if we do not take measures to reduce their impact, we are likely to close business, not only in the HR department, but the whole organization. And that is where risk management is very important. And we need to use analytics in order to do these risk assessments. First of all, there is the concept of risk, where we are saying that risk assessment involves identification. That means establishing the type or specific kind of risks that may face the HR department. And then evaluation is the assessment in terms of causality, causes, in terms of impact, and likelihood of happening. In the next few minutes, we are going to see how we can do this risk assessment by way of developing a risk heat map. So this heat map will tell us the likelihood and the impact. So if you multiply the numbers on the impact side and the likelihood, so you will get the severity of the risks so that you can prioritize. Secondly, the purpose is to reduce the threats affecting HR processes, which are related to recruitment, to training, to performance management. And secondly is to ensure compliance with our own policies and compliance with the labor laws and other industry regulations. The scope of risk assessment, it covers staffing, where you are talking about recruitment, selection up to onboarding, legal compliance, these are the laws, particularly the Labor Relations Act, the Employment Act, OSHA, among others. Engagement, this is the commitment of employees to the organization. So the engagement risks, if people are not engaged or are disengaged, they are likely to leave the organization, and that becomes a risk. Where does the risk lie? In filling the position, 2, in losing performance within the period that somebody has left, and 3, reputation of the organization. And then we shall also cover succession, where we are looking at suitable replacements for those people who leave the organization for any reason or are promoted. And then we shall look at operational risks. These are the day-to-day risks associated with like production of goods and services at the shop floor or employees exiting the organization. The foundation of risk assessment is that it combines both quantitative and the qualitative methods. Quantitative are statistical, where we are looking at the cost, probably the cost of losing an employee or the cost of replacing that employee. That is a quantitative aspect. Qualitative is something that you cannot easily measure, but you can describe, for example, reputation. That if our employees are leaving in large numbers, that affects our reputation. And that is qualitative. Other qualitatives could be engagement. You cannot measure employee engagement in terms of liters or kilograms, you can only do an estimation that they are highly engaged or not engaged or disengaged. Those are not quantitatives, but we can do ratings or weightings so that we can determine the level of engagement. So who are the users of this? Just like I mentioned at the beginning, HR leaders can use risk assessment, managers, executives, and many more. The enablers, we utilize HR audits. And again, I will invite you to our training on HR audit coming up in the course of the month, where we shall discuss an evaluation of the HR policies, systems, processes, and procedures with a view to improving them or making them more effective. So if it is training, we identify training risks through an audit, and then we take corrective measures. HRMIS is another system which we can use to determine our performance in terms of recruitment, training, and other areas. We can conduct surveys. These are questionnaires that we can design, for example, employee engagement surveys, so that it can give us an insight of whether our employees are committed, and if not, they are likely to leave because of that non-commitment. And then risk frameworks, one of which is the heat map, where we are looking at impact against likelihood and then making a calculation. Types of risks. There is one, the compliance risk, where we are looking at the level to which our processes, systems, and procedures comply with the labor laws, all labor laws without exception. Regulations, these are industry requirements. For example, in health and safety,
Andrew, we've lost you.
sorry, my network is a bit unstable today. My apologies. So I was talking about compliance, that we need to obey the labor laws, regulations, and internal HR policies. Secondly, operational risks. These are errors that are associated with HR processes like recruitment and training. Talent risks. These are shortages in terms of skills and numbers, which can arise from employee turnover or lack of adequate succession plans. 3 is engagement risks, which is associated with low morale, satisfaction. Technology risks like the one we are facing this morning, system failures, that your system might fail out of technical causes. Data breaches, where somebody is leaking data to unauthorized parties, and that speaks to data integrity. And again, we are aware of the Data Protection Act, which requires that any data that is collected by a data handler or a data processor should be kept in confidence. Strategic risks, these are associated with the long-term attainment of organizational goals, where staff may be misaligned in terms of skills and knowledge, where rewarding is not tailored towards organizational goals, and even performance management is not working. What are the risk indicators? Number 1 is turnover trend, that employees are leaving your organizations, and that can be determined by conducting a turnover analysis. Secondly, there is the element of time to fill. This refers to recruitment time. How much time do you take to fill a vacant position? In public sector, it can take fairly long, months, sometimes a month, sometimes 3 months, and even 4 months, depending on the dynamics in the organization. In the technology world, you can take a maximum of 45 days time to hire. But again, depending on your resources and others, can take to up to 90 days. That means 3 months. Overtime ratio, you look at the number of people doing overtime, and you need to establish why overtime is required so that you don't overwork your people. If they have to do overtime, it means that they have to go beyond the working hours. That is an indication that the human resources in terms of numbers are not adequate, or the roles that have to be performed are more than the numbers. So you do a job analytics to find out how many people are required and how many tasks are performed in one job. Grievance count, these are the number of complaints that are forwarded to the HR department, because complaints may convolute to a dispute. Even if it is one complaint, it should be taken into consideration, investigated, and a determination made. Training lag, I also mentioned this. This is the number of mandatory courses past due exceeding 15. What do I mean here? You look at the number of mandatory courses that have been completed over the number of courses that were expected. And then why 15? It is because that is your expectation, exceeding 15. If it exceeds 15, then you are not doing very well. If it is below 5, then you are doing very well. And that is the question that Consulate asked, that if you set yourself a training lag, that completion can be 15%. That is the maximum you can allow for completion failure. Then offer decline rate, this has to do with the recruitment, how many people have accepted or declined the offer. And again, the people don't decline offers just for fun. There must be reasons. One, the working conditions. 2, the way of onboarding was done. 3, the salary expectations. 4, the leadership that they see on the first day they report to the end of the onboarding process. So there are a variety of factors that can affect the decline rate. So those are some of the indicators of risks, touching on recruitment, touching on performance, grievance training, among others. Risk assessment, this is the heat map I was talking about. You assess risks in terms of likelihood. Likelihood refers to the possibility of it happening. Some risks may not happen at all, which means that they are very rare, and others are almost certain, meaning that you can always expect that risk to occur. So you need to look at that, the likelihood, against the impact. So the impact here is the severity of the risk if nothing is done. For example, somebody neglecting to do their work, which they were supposed to do. For example, driving a crane. That crane, for example, in the port of Mombasa, there are people driving cranes. Somebody neglects to put down the crane and somebody else drives the crane. That is negligence, which can amount to disciplinary action, which is gross misconduct. That is, the impact is very high. Suppose that crane, the luggage falls from wherever it is to a person down there, instant death. That is catastrophic. Risk scoring, you multiply the likelihood with the impact and you get the score. So if the likelihood is 1 and the impact is 1, that is negligible. So that gives you 1. So if the likelihood is 5 and the occurrence is almost certain, that means 25. 5 times 5, 25. So in terms of prioritizing, you look at those with the greatest impact, that is 25. And that is what you call the heat map risk method. The risk management process, you start with the risk identification. Like I said earlier, you detect those threats to recruitment, training, to performance. And you can use audits, you can use metrics, and you can use employee feedback. Metrics are measurements that we get, like cost of hiring, time to hire, so that you can determine your risk. Then risk assessment, this is an evaluation of the likelihood and impact, which I've already mentioned in terms of the heat map. Risk prioritization, based on the risk assessment, the impact can be high, can be moderate, or can be low. So in that case, you prioritize those risks that have a higher impact. That does not mean that we ignore those that have low impact. We need to monitor them on a regular basis, because one action which did not have an impact yesterday might have a different impact today. Risk mitigation, you prepare strategies, which I'll talk about, strategies to reduce the impact of the risks. And then you need to continuously monitor risks, because even if you take preventive measures, for example, training people so that they can take care of a new technology that's more preventive, you need to monitor whether that training has really helped to prevent employee struggles when you are introducing a technology. Then lastly, you report and review. You report to the relevant authorities about the risks and then review meaning that you update this on a regular basis, just in case there are new risks that have arisen. What are the strategies for risk mitigation or reduction? Policy enforcement. Ensure that all policies in our organization are complied with. The labor laws should also be complied with. How do you do that? Please do an audit of the compliance levels of the labor laws and the policies that are in place. Compliance. Secondly is process controls. If it is recruitment, ensure that the process is regularly checked to identify any potential gaps and take remedial measures in advance. Approvals, for example, in the recruitment, we need approvals. Don't skip that process, because if you don't approve, you run the risk of accountability, that you hired people without approval. That can become a serious offense, which may lead to disciplinary action. And then training awareness. You train people based on the potential risks that are likely to happen. So if it is turnover risk, you train people so that they can improve their skills. If it's a new technology, train them so that they can improve. Another mitigation measure is technology safeguards, where you protect your data so that you ensure data integrity. And instead of relying on manual systems, you use HR management systems. Succession planning. This is where you prepare employees at lower levels to take positions at a higher level. This involves doing a leadership and skills analytics so that you identify those people with the potential. And as I mentioned earlier, potential has to do with 1, performance, 2, skills, 3, experience, and other competencies. These are the people eligible for promotion or succession planning. And then contingency planning, that for every plan, you must have a backup plan. That in case a system fails, what is the backup? In case an employee exits, what is the backup? So you must have an alternative plan that will take care of unforeseen eventualities. What is the need for conducting risk assessment? One is to ensure that employees are aware of the risks that may arise in an organization. For example, you have an open website, employees are visiting the website. Scammers and other viruses can be transmitted through these websites. If they click on certain websites, you might have scammers there. So employees should be aware of such a technological risk where you are exposing yourself to viruses, to scamming, or to corruption of our files, and even leaking of confidential data. So awareness is very important because awareness makes people know which areas they cannot go when they are using their networks. Compliance assurance so that we avoid lawsuits. Lawsuits are very expensive in terms of fines, penalties, and even closure. Organizations can close if certain requirements are not complied with. Next is operational continuity. And we mentioned the types of risks. We said strategic risks, operational risks. That if there are operational risks, we are able to prevent disruptions because we have contingency plans. Cost avoidance, and again, many of the functions of HR involve costs. like the cost of recruitment, cost of training, cost of other things. And when you talk of compliance, there are penalties. But if you comply, there is a reduction of cost of penalties. Inefficiency, we reduce that because inefficiency means that we are using more resources than we should. And other unexpected HR-related expenses or costs, which we should have avoid. And then lastly is employee trust, that when we manage our risks very well, we promote confidence among our employees that they will be taken good care of and that they operate in a free space, and therefore we reduce employee turnover and increase employee commitment or engagement. So somebody might have a question on HR risk and mitigation. So the floor is ours. Please go ahead with your question or make your comment.
Excuse me, Andrew.
Yes, Consulate?
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to clarify on overtime ratio. And then I have an observation on organizational value, risk awareness. I have heard comments from employees that when they are less informed, the employees are easier to manage. When they are so well informed, like risk awareness is, you're saying the leadership will understand the workforce vulnerability and threats. But then the workforce has been made aware and they have made the leadership very difficult. I don't know what your experience is in that situation where you create awareness and it is used against you for making people enlightened. I don't know what your experience is on that one. So kindly explain to me the overtime ratio. Okay, you used a base pay and I wasn't very sure. Is that an example, a hypothetical value, or that's what should happen? Kindly, just overtime ratio.
Okay. Thank you, Consulate. Let me start with the second part of your question, which is when awareness creation
becomes
where employees use this against the management. You create awareness and then they use this awareness against you. It's always good practice, actually a best practice, to ensure that employees are aware of the critical aspects related to them and the organization to promote a good working relationship. They must be aware of, one, the HR policies. Two, they must be aware of HR systems. Three, they must be aware of HR processes. Without this awareness, an employee cannot perform effectively. I want to imagine that there are certain aspects that you may discuss with the employee for purposes of awareness. For example, the finances of the organization or the risks that are there in an organization, which you may discuss with them in confidence. And then they use this against you. So how do you go about this? That this awareness should be based on a need to know basis, a need to know. That if there is somebody who needs to know how the finances of an organization are, it could be the finance department and possibly HR and other senior management. In the unlikely event that you discuss this with a junior staff and then discloses this to other members, I think that is reckless on the part of the manager to share this information with other employees, which can be used against you. To be on the safe side, share information on need-to-know basis, and if possible, do it in writing so that you can defend yourself that I shared this information for this purpose, and this was the expected outcome. So we should not share any information that can work against us. And if it is likely to work against us, please ensure that it is confidential and it is well documented so that people don't use it against you. And then going back to your first question, this is overtime ratio. This is a measurement or a metric that can be used to determine the amount of hours and money spent on overtime. So that one, we know how many employees are working overtime. And in some quarters, if employees have to work overtime, you have to cap it somewhere, like 10 hours a week or 10 hours a month. Because there is a tendency of employees avoiding their work so that they can be paid overtime. Well aware that overtime on a working day attracts 1.5% of the daily earnings of that employees. And it is 2% or double, let's say double the amount that the employee is paid if it is on a holiday. So people can take advantage of this. So this is where you are looking at one, the proportion of overtime, proportional, how many working hours are overtime, and you compare that with the proportion of normal working hours. So it's not hypothetical. You look at the total overtime worked, and then you divide that by the total working hours so that you can establish how many hours are done overtime. We expect that an overtime ratio could be lower than 10. And here we are talking about percentage, lower than 10. If that is the case, then anybody working over 10%, that is a cost to the organization, which you should avoid. Because a high ratio means that the employees might be at risk of stress. Employees can be stressed or burnout if they work over the 10 hours. Secondly, it can mean employees are earning more than their normal working hours. And again, that becomes a disadvantage to the organization because you have allowed people to work overtime. So again, consulate, you need to develop a clear policy on the number of overtime hours that people have to work. And if any more staff are needed, because people working overtime means that they are not able to finish the workload. You do a workload analysis, and if the workload is so high, then you look for a solution, and the solution is recruitment and selection. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask?
Yes.
On remote working,
yes.
How do you measure overtime ratio when maybe the employee decided to work late because there is no monitoring? So they decide to work till late to meet their deadlines. Like me, I work from home 3 times in a week. And I depending on my workload, I can decide by myself to work up to even 9 p.m. because I want to meet my deadlines. So it's not a forced issue, but how would you measure the overtime ratio on people working remotely?
Okay. Maria, you have a question?
I have already asked. I think you didn't hear me.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
I
me.
saw your hand
let
up.
me lower my hand.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Maria. You are concerned about remote working, and you have a practical experience of how it works. You have indicated that there is no effective monitoring by the employer or manager, and you may end up working late or for long hours, leading to stress and burnout. I believe that is your concern. Eh?
Yes, and how it is measured, if there is that bit of overtime ratio. If someone says that they have worked till midnight, you don't know what time they started working because you are not with them. So how would you measure that?
One answer to that, or let me say two answers. Let me start with the monitoring aspect. That there is already a gap in the way you monitor your remote employees, meaning that you can not pin them down for not working in the normal hours or extra hours. That is a gap in management that you can raise with your team so that we have systems for monitoring employees' working hours. And then secondly, measuring overtime requires a system that can tell the time you logged in, and two, a system that can tell the time you logged out. So if you logged in at 8 in the morning or 8:30, the logout time could be 8 in the evening. Those are 10 hours, meaning that you have exceeded the time for working. If you are to work for 8 hours, you have exceeded by 2 hours. So if you have such a system, it should tell that you work for an extra time of 2 hours. However, the question comes, if you worked for an excess amount of time, was it because of the system that was not working? Two, was it because of the workload you could not finish on time? Or three, there were other interruptions, because we cannot establish whether there were interruptions or not. There were interruptions. So taking into consideration those factors, then you must have a reporting mechanism. Reporting to tell, one, there was a technical hitch which made you to stop working at some point, and you ended up closing at 8 in the evening. Two, if there is a break in between, you should report that now I'm taking a break so that the supervisors are aware that there is a break taken, and therefore that is not taken as billable hours, billable. So with this reporting system, you are able to tell whether the employee had a technical issue or taken a break, or there was an emergency on the other end. And then lastly, in terms of workload, you need to do a workload analysis, that under normal circumstances, how many tasks can an employee complete successfully on a working day of 8 hours? So that if you have a lot of work to do, then it is legitimate and justifiable for you to work for those 2 extra hours, and you should be compensated for those extra hours because you had more work to do than the normal work day. So those are the interventions that you need to look at. One, if I may repeat, in terms of monitoring, discuss that with your management team and see how you can streamline that monitoring. 2, in terms of measuring the overtime rate, you develop a system. I hope you can raise this with your management, what time you log in and what time you log out. So that will give you the average time of an employee working. And then 3, you need to have an inbuilt reporting system where if there is a technological failure, you report that. If there is a break taken, you report that, so that those hours are not counted as part of working. And then lastly, you do a workload analysis. It may not be you doing that. You may need to do it as a department or invite a consultant to do that for you. So workload analysis will tell you the number of tasks and how much time is required to complete those tasks effectively. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. That is well advised. Mostly my work doesn't require all this because it's my supervised roles, my own supervised roles. It's my delivery that matters. Yeah. So I was asking generally, not even if I work late, it's because maybe I wanted to just meet that deadline. But that is well advised because there are other departments that need those analysis, and the logins, we have the logins, the system logins that is there, and most of these things they do. The departments that need monitoring, most of these things are there. So it was just a concern that maybe some departments might need to be paid overtime, like insurance, so actuarial. They sometimes work very late, and it is a concern. Yeah. Even though most of them work from office.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Maria. And again, you may need to look at the possibility of conducting an employee engagement survey, yes, so that you determine what is this that can make them engaged or disengaged. Because if they work overtime and the salary is the same, you are likely to lose them.
Yes. Thank you for that.
So if there is any other person with a question or comment, please go ahead. Okay. If there is no question, I will now propose that we move to the second last part as we finish. People-related ROI, where ROI is return on investment. And almost everything that we do in an organization is an investment. That even when you are recruiting, you are investing in this person in terms of, one, the cost of hiring. How much do you spend? You don't want to spend so much and you don't get returns from this recruitment. The same with training. You are investing in training so that people improve their skills, and the end result is increased revenue or profits. Or if it is compensation and reward, you pay people so that they can perform. That performance is the ROI. We need to measure their performance if there's an increment, for example, in compensation, I hope some of us had a salary increment as a result of the Labor Day proposals. If there is an increment of salaries, we expect an increased output. That is the return we expect by taking stock of what the employee was delivering before the increment, and then you subtract that from the current performance over the increment, and you multiply that by 100, you'll get the added value in terms of revenue or in terms of profits. To start ourselves in that part of return on investment is the concept of ROI, where we are measuring how much we are gaining from an initiative. So this initiative could be recruitment, training, performance management, compensation, among others. And this is why we need to conduct audits and analytics so that we can measure those improvements after investment. What is the purpose? Is to assess the effectiveness of HR strategies. For example, recruitment, and you are looking at the decline rate of employee offers. So if the rate is very high, that shows that our system in recruitment is not effective. And the same can be done with the training. That if after training the employees remain the same or even perform poorly, it means that our HR strategy on training has failed. So the intention of conducting a return on investment is to ensure that all HR initiatives are working properly and delivering results. What are the areas covered? It covers training, recruitment, performance, retention, and talent. And I will give an example of this as a case as we close. The foundation, again, we use these tools like human resource information systems, financial metrics, and others. The users are the HR directors, managers, and other executives who may need this data, so that one, we are able to identify how we are doing as a department. Two, we look at areas of weakness. And three, take corrective actions. The enablers, I mentioned a dashboard. This is a real-time tool, which is digital, where you feed data and it gives you instant feedback. We can also do benchmarks by way of comparing ourselves within and outside the organization. And then we use KPIs. These are key performance indicators. For example, in recruitment, a key performance indicator could be reduction in cost of hiring. So at the end of this process, we should see a reduced cost of hiring. What are the categories of these metrics? We start with the productivity metric. This is where we are measuring or tracking the output of employees' efficiency and the performance. And how do we go about this? We look at the total output, and this output could be in terms of units or in terms of revenues. You divide that by the number of employees, you will get the output per employee. For example, the total revenue generated in an organization could be 5 million. How many employees are working? Maybe 40. So 5 million divided by 40, you will get the numbers, and that will get the productivity level per employee. But that's a universal figure. You may need to look at the specific KPIs employees who are to produce. So you get the total KPIs per that employee, and then you can determine how much they have increased. So you look at the previous minus the current, you divide by the current, you multiply by 100, you will get your total output. Then engagement metrics. I mentioned earlier that engagement has to do with the level of commitment of our employees to the organization. So the engagement score, and I will give a case somewhere at the end, is where you look at the total survey points. For example, 5 people scored an employee, and each employee scored 1 to 5. So there could be 4, 3, 2, 1, and 5 if there are those employees. So you get all those totals divided by the maximum possible points. So if the employees were 5, the maximum possible points are 25. So you divide 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 25. So 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, you divide that by 25, you multiply by 100, you get the engagement rate. It is expected that the engagement rate should be over 85%, over 85. If it's below 85, then there is something that is causing dissatisfaction, either related to work environment or salaries or even leadership, which can be addressed as early as possible. Then retention metrics, you look at the total number of employees remaining. You divide that by the employees at the start. For example, this year, the employees who started an organization are 20. But at the end of this year, 18 are remaining. So it is 18 divided by the average. You don't just go to the start, that will give you an error. You divide that by the average, that means employees at the beginning and the employees who are left, you divide that by 2, and then you multiply by 100, it will give you a measurement. And the retention should be again 85 and above. Why? Because we lose a lot when employees leave. So a higher retention rate gives you a favorable figure, which you can be proud of and which can lead to organizational performance. There are cost metrics. Costs are related to all functions, recruitment, training, performance, even the total reward or benefits. You want to get a ratio of the benefits vis-a-vis the total budget for compensation. You get all the benefits, the total cost of all the benefits. You divide that by the total budget for the benefit, you multiply that by 100, you will get your total cost of benefits. So you look at if it is the total cost, in terms of ratio, you look at the total revenue divided by the total labor costs. You multiply that by 100, it gives you a total revenue. Lastly is talent acquisition. A return on talent acquisition could be reduced cost. And you can calculate that by looking at the recruitment costs, multiply by the value generated by the recruitment, then you divide that by value generated, then multiply by 100. There's an error here of a typing error here, but it's okay. So you'll get your talent acquisition return, that how much did it cost you to bring somebody on board, how much value have they generated, and then you divide that by the total recruitment cost, multiply by 100, you'll get your figure. Where do we apply this? Returns on investment program evaluation, and any program. It could be training program. It could be onboarding. It could be mentorship and coaching. So we can apply returns on any of the functions of HR. And then decision making, that when we determine the returns, any function that brings a lower return, we make a decision of improving or eliminating activities that may have led to those low returns. Thirdly is performance tracking. Performance at 3 levels. One, the individual. You look at how the individual employees are doing. For example, we are looking at return on investment per employee on training. So you get all the returns from training. You divide that by the total number of employees. You multiply that by 100, you will get the total returns per employee. In some cases, we can do as a team. How much is a team bringing, especially in a team environment? But again, we should take care of those people who are malingerers. They want others to work, and they want to associate with the results. And then lastly is organizational performance. How much are we contributing to the overall attainment of the organizational objectives? So if the organization was to reduce cost by 20%, as HR, how much have we done in terms of reducing the cost of staffing? Budget optimization, we are looking at how much we are spending on the HR initiatives with the intention of ensuring that we do not overspend. No organization in the world has unlimited number of resources, particularly financial resources. So we should always limit our expenses to the budget, if not below the budget. If we explode our budget, then we run the risk of becoming a cost center, which we shouldn't be. Benchmarking, by way of comparison, we can compare what we do as HR, either internally or externally. So you compare what performance is like in another department, for example, finance, or audit. How are they doing that? So that you can obtain or borrow best practices through these comparisons. And when you are doing industry comparison, please ensure that you are doing this in the same or a similar industry, because different industries operate using different parameters and are affected by different aspects in the environment, and therefore you cannot compare. Lastly, strategic planning. Consulate, I can't hear you.
Is now very bad. We can hardly get a full sentence from you. Your network now is very bad. We can hardly get a
network is okay on our end.
Consolata, please check your network. Andrew's network is very okay.
It is.
Consulate, please check your network. Thank you. Okay, we continue. So I was talking about benchmarking. Please compare yourself with the same industry so that you can get the actual figures. Otherwise, you run the risk of having errors when you are comparing yourself with others not in the same industry. It also informs strategic planning, where we are looking at the outcomes of these analytics, be it recruitment, training, performance, so that we can make strategic decisions. So in this case, we are trying to align HR initiatives with the corporate strategies so that we don't have a strategic drift. What are the benefits of conducting this analytics? And this analytics, we are referring to what we were talking about here, ROI. Why is it important in terms of strategy? One, finances. That by having insights from these ROIs, we are able to, one, monitor our revenues and expenses, and two, finance certain critical functions within HR so that we continue producing results. Operational effectiveness, again, processes, systems need to work optimally. And if this optimal performance is a return, then that is what we call effectiveness. It also assists in employee development, where we are looking at the return on investment from training, that there is improved revenue, there is improved profits, there is added value in terms of retention, then we should invest more in employee development. Cost efficiency, I've talked about it, the amount we spend on any initiative. We need to optimize our costs, not overspend and not underspend. Like some of our counties, I hear that there are some counties that underspend and return the bulk of the allocations to Treasury. I know there are factors that may lead to that, but I believe something needs to be done when you underspend. Maybe when you underspend in HR, the next time they will ask you, why should we give you more money in your next budget if you do not utilize the amount that you are given? Leadership confidence, and again, we present data to our senior management to justify our operations and expenditure. Like in recruitment, we give figures. In training, we give figures. Those are reports that we give to our senior executives. And if the figures are adding up, then they are likely to have confidence in us. Otherwise, if you are spending and spending and there's nothing to show, then you run the risk of being declared obsolete, and therefore you cannot get funded, and that unit can easily be outsourced. Lastly is organizational alignment, that when we get the figures on return on investment, we get to connect the HR initiatives with the corporate objectives. That at all times, whatever we are doing must be aligned. If it's recruitment, we align that. Training, we align. Not only in terms of attainment of those objectives, but also in terms of the projected revenues and projected profits, if you are in a profit-making organization. But even in private public organizations, though you may not be making profit, that is your revenue, you need to increase your revenues and reduce cost. So if there are so many costs, like today, there are few public organizations that are at training, meaning that training is not a key consideration, especially when the organization is not doing very well financially. So training becomes the first culprit to be eliminated. Before we go to the case analytics, again, I would like to invite anybody with a question or an experience to share. Please go ahead. Return on investment. Caroline, if you are there, if you have a question, please go ahead.
I have a question on metric categories.
Okay, thank you.
Who should go first? Caroline, are you there?
I'm here. I don't have a question. I'm following. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Consulate?
I have a question on metric categories. When you are talking about retention metrics, and you've given us an example, for example, you started with 20 people, and by the end of the year, you compute an average, what the average number is. So it's still 20. You've ended with 18. You said you divide 18 by 20, then divide by 2, then times 100. Now I want to know why by 2.
Okay. Let me clarify that. The number of people at the beginning of the year was 20. The number of people remaining now is 18. So what you do if you want to get an accurate ratio is you divide 18, so that the number of people remaining 18, divide that by 20 minus 18. Then you divide that by 2. You multiply by 100, you will get a figure. Why do we do the average?
Okay.
It is because we may have an error where we are directly computing or calculating the number of people who are remaining over the number of people who are there initially. So we need to get those who are there initially and those who are there now, so that we get the accurate number. So you plus.
But why do you divide 2?
We divide by 2 because there are 2 incidences here. One at the beginning and one at the end. Yes. So you divide that by 2.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else with a question? Thank you. So let us go to the last part of our interaction this morning. And that is a few cases of analytics to see whether we are doing well or not in those areas. As you have already realized, there are so many aspects that we conduct analytics in, so many aspects. And therefore, it's not possible for us to look at all those. I only picked 3 critical examples, but again, from my explanation and the formulas I had given earlier, you should be able to make calculations on the various aspects that we have discussed. So the first case here is where an organization, or rather, let me start with introduction. This is a real world example, like company XYZ. You don't mention companies here, but it's company XY, a real example, where you are looking at various initiatives and conducting data analytics on those initiatives. The purpose is to show the impact of data-driven decisions, and I will demonstrate that by conducting those analytics, you will get certain figures or outcomes, and those outcomes should enable you to make an interpretation of what is happening. And that interpretation will enable you to make a decision. The scope, it covers all tools that we have used before or have mentioned, like HR analytics, risk assessment, and ROI. So it covers all that. The foundation is that, again, we use actual data so that we make decisions that are based on real data. And that requires high quality data. You can ensure quality by designing a tool that can give you the right data. 2, you can pilot test that tool before using it. 3, you can consider validity of that tool, that's the accuracy of the tool that you are going to use to ensure that you get the right figures. And again, on the users, everybody needs this case. Enablers, dashboards, metrics, and AI tools can be used to conduct these case studies. Case 1, we are looking at the quality of hire. If you look at what I've presented there, and I pray that someone is earning this money, QOH, that is the quality of hire, looks at the average performance of an employee over the last 6 months. Why 6 months? Because this is the period of probation for some organizations. And we want to measure the performance of the employee over that period. So you also look at the expected ratings so that you get a figure. And then from that expected ratings, you are going to multiply that by the salary. Why salary? It is because performance is related to payment, so that we pay a person based on their performance. I guess some of us work in an organization or organizations that use these 2 methods. 1, performance-related payment, and 2, payment by results, PRP and PBR, payment by results. So somebody brings checks amounting to so much and is paid so much money as a commission. So we need to look at that, the expected checks. You subtract that from the check that was brought, you multiply that by the salary they get, then you will get your score. So in this case, organization X, the performance rating of an employee is 4.5, and here we are using a rating of 1 to 5. 1 to 5. So if you get the average rating of that employee is 4.5. And then the expected organizational rating is 3.5. So if you get 3.5 and above, it means that you have exceeded the expectation. And if you get below 3.5, it means that you have not met expectations. That means that the quality of hire was poor if the employee has not met expectation. But if they have exceeded expectation, it means that the employee has performed well. And these are the figures, our calculation. So our calculation is there, looking at quality of hire. At the end of the 6-month period, the employee got 4.5. Using our formula here, you minus 3.5 from 4.5, and then you multiply by the salary. The salary here is 1.2 million. And that's why I was praying that somebody should be getting this money per month. these are hypothetical figures. So it means that the final result, because if you minus 4.5, 3.5 from 4.5, you get 1. So 1 times 1.2 million, you get 1.2 million. So the interpretation here is that the employee has generated a positive result. A positive result. And this is calculated annually, annual salary, a positive result for that year, 1.2 million. And we should congratulate ourselves for having done very well if the quality of hire is producing 1.5. That is a positive. But if it's a negative, it means that the employee maybe has a rating of 2.5. 2.5 minus 3.5, you get negative 1. If you multiply that, you will get less than 1 million or something like 600,000. That becomes a very small amount that that employee has generated over the year, and therefore the quality of hire is poor. The second case is return on investment, where we are looking at training. In training, we are looking at this formula where you are looking at the total benefits. You subtract the total cost. You divide that by training cost. There's a T missing there, training cost. You multiply that by 100, you'll get your ratio, how much the training has contributed to the total revenue of the organization. I've given an example there. Sales revenue before training, 12 million. Sales revenue after training, 16. What is the balance? 4 million. What is the total training cost? 1.5. So if we do a calculation, you will see it here. That is total amount generated or revenue generated, benefits, is 4 million. Total training cost is 1.5 million. There's an error there that we need to get the total gain, that is the total benefit, that is 4 million minus training cost, that is 1.5. I think that's correct. You divide that by the total training cost. You multiply by 100, you'll get your figure there, which is 1.6. Return of every training or every shilling that you spent on training. So that is how you calculated the return on investment from training. And then the last one is turnover calculation. So the turnover rate, employee exits. Consulate asked about the retention rate. This time around, we are looking at the turnover, employees who have exited over the average number of employees for that period. You multiply by 100, you will get your number. In this case, employees who have exited, 48. Average workforce is 320. And if we do our calculation there, we get 420 divided by 320 times 100, that gives you 15%. So the average workforce is 320. The exits is 48. And again, as I said, the average is gotten by looking at those who are remaining or those who have exited over the average. Probably to get this 320, it could have been 480. And those who are remaining 320, so 48 have left. Like that by 100, you get your figure. So by interpretation, it means that there are 15% of employees who leave the organization. And again, going by industry standards, you may be safe, depending on the skills that have left. That 15% is the standard, which means that you have retained 85. 85 can make you move around and achieve your objectives. But the desired number of employee retention should be above 85. So ladies and gentlemen, we want to look at the future of this analytics. Where are we going? As we have already realized, there is already an increased usage of artificial intelligence in many of the things that we do. So as we move forward, we are likely to use AI tools to make this analytics. You need to feed data into your AI tools, and it can make calculations for you, and you get the results. Real-time analytics, where you use dashboards, and I indicated that a dashboard is a digital tool where we input data and the tool calculates the figures and gives you a result in real time. And I believe that is the direction we are going, using real-time data. Even for those who are in project management, you may want to know whether the employees are in the field or are in their homes. There are tools for such kind of work, and these tools can even tell the exact location the person is, so that you don't have people who lie about where they are. And even when you do the work in the field, that data can be relayed to a central position in real time. The moment you click a button, it shows. And real time means like sending a text, it's in real time, either WhatsApp or SMS. Then predictive workforce planning, which we have already looked at, where we are forecasting demand and supply using statistical tools. And again, we rely on AI, we rely on HRIMS or other tools to conduct workforce planning. Automation, we are going to see an increment in automation of processes. One case is where we have automated recruitment by way of using ATS. Other organizations have already automated training. They have pre-installed modules and timelines, and employers are expected to go through the modules, answer examination questions, and then proceed to the next. And the performance in that training can be measured in real time using automation. Cybersecurity, I'm sure many of us who have children, including mine, they are asking, can we do a course in cybersecurity? The answer is yes. That the more we use technology, the more we want our systems to be secure. We must protect our data from hackers, from viruses, from theft. So cybersecurity is another area where we ensure that our data integrity is enhanced. Otherwise, we are likely to lose data, confidentiality or confidential information, which may affect us negatively. I am sure that in your organizations, as part of your cybersecurity, you have created awareness on how you can protect your data. And part of the Data Protection Act, organizations are required to train their employees on the usage of technologies and how they can easily be exposed through this same technology. And then lastly is strategic HR transformation. We have argued and will continue to argue that the position of a HR manager is at the top. It's no longer at the administrative level. And at that level, we participate in strategy formulation and to some extent strategy implementation. That when we sit at the strategic level, we are having a helicopter view of the organization and aligning HR initiatives with those strategies. In this way, we are able to add the greatest value to our organizations, without which we will continue playing the administrative role, which may not take us very far. At the moment you cannot make a decision which is binding, then you are not strategic enough. You have to consult other people to make those decisions. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I want to close there. And for the last time, ask if there is anybody with a question or a comment or an experience to share, please go ahead so that we can close. The floor is ours. Jacinta, you are there? Collins Mwenda? Sarah? Beatrice? Monica, if you are there, please go ahead. All right.
All right. I'm okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Monica. So if there is no question, there is no comment, it is now my singular pleasure and opportunity to thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for your patience. I hope to see you again another time at the same place. And may God bless you and have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon to you too.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Enjoy your weekend.
You too.